Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, a name long synonymous with Moscow's diplomacy, has been in office for more than 2 decades, making him one of the most enduring figures in Russian politics. But today, silence surrounds him. Once a constant presence on television screens and at international summits, Lavrov has vanished from the public stage. His last public appearance was at the end of October, and since then, rumours have spread through Moscow's political circles that he has fallen out of favour with President Vladimir Putin. Lavrov's absence has sparked speculation of a rift between two of the most powerful men in the Kremlin. Reports suggest that tensions began after Lavrov failed to finalise an agreement with US Senator Marco Rubio, acting as President Donald Trump's special envoy, on the terms of a planned meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. That meeting was cancelled, and it was said to have deeply frustrated the Russian president. Since then, Lavrov's once commanding presence has faded into carefully worded written statements issued by the Foreign Ministry. No press conferences, no appearances, no visible role in Russia's foreign agenda. For a man who has survived multiple administrations and geopolitical storms, such silence is deafening. Lavrov, known for his sharp intellect and steely demeanour, built his reputation on outmanoeuvring his Western counterparts from Washington to Brussels. Yet the political winds in Moscow have shifted. The Kremlin is tightening its circle, emphasising loyalty and alignment with Putin's hardline vision of Russia's global role. Insiders say Lavrov's measured diplomacy and occasional pragmatism no longer fit the current mood. A Russia increasingly isolated, sanctioned and defiant. To understand this decline, one must look at Lavrov's own words. In an earlier statement this year, he said, "Without respect for Russia's security interests, without full respect for the rights of Russians and Russian-speaking people who live in Ukraine, there can be no talk of any long-term agreements." It was classic Lavrov, firm, unapologetic, and grounded in Moscow's long-standing position. But to some within the Kremlin, it was not forceful enough. Hardliners now argue that Russia's diplomacy should mirror its military posture, unyielding, aggressive, and unwilling to compromise. Lavrov's difficulties grew in the months following the US-Russia standoff over Ukraine's ceasefire talks. While he maintained that Russia's interests must be protected, his handling of Western negotiations was criticised internally. The failure to secure face-to-face talks between Putin and Trump, despite the groundwork laid by Moscow's diplomatic corps, was seen as a personal setback. For a leadership obsessed with optics and power projection, appearances matter, and Lavrov's absence at key events is impossible to ignore. Adding to the intrigue, Lavrov will not represent Russia at the upcoming G20 Summit in South Africa, an unprecedented decision for a man who has attended nearly every such gathering since 2004. Instead, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov will lead the delegation, fueling further speculation that Putin is quietly reshuffling his diplomatic hierarchy. Kremlin insiders insist it is a temporary adjustment, but the timing, following weeks of Lavrov's silence, tells a different story. Still, traces of Lavrov's voice remain. At a joint press conference in August, he warned Western governments against using Ukraine as a tool to provoke Russia. "They're just looking for an excuse to block negotiations," he said. "This is an attempt to disrupt the process initiated by Presidents Putin and Trump, which has yielded very good results." The comment reflected his frustration with Western diplomacy, but also underscored the fragility of his own position within Moscow's hierarchy. Those who know him say he sensed the change coming, that his diplomatic language no longer resonated with a Kremlin increasingly defined by confrontation, not conversation. Lavrov's long career is marked by consistency and endurance. Born in 1950, he served as Russia's ambassador to the United Nations before being appointed foreign minister by Putin in 2004. He quickly became the public face of Russia's diplomacy, a man equally comfortable quoting poetry as he was issuing stern warnings to NATO. His command of language, his to blend civility with threat, made him one of the most formidable foreign ministers in modern history. But that very sophistication, once seen as strength, may now be seen as weakness by those around Putin who prefer bluntness over nuance. In recent months, Lavrov's few recorded appearances have been telling. At the UN General Assembly in September, he delivered a defiant address criticising Western hypocrisy over Ukraine and Gaza. Yet observers noted his subdued tone compared to previous years. After the speech, he left the podium quietly without taking questions, an uncharacteristic retreat for a man who once thrived on verbal sparring with Western journalists. The following week saw him stand behind Putin during meetings with North Korean officials, his expression neutral, his role unclear. For much of the Russian elite, the question now is not whether Lavrov will retire, but when. Some say he may be reassigned as a senior advisor, preserving dignity while making room for a new generation of diplomats. Others believe he may quietly step down by year's end, his departure framed as a well-deserved rest after decades of service. Either way, the transition would mark the end of an era, the exit of the last Soviet-trained diplomat still holding a top government post. Behind closed doors, however, there may be more personal reasons for the chill between Putin and Lavrov. Analysts suggest that Lavrov's nuanced approach to the US-Russia dialogue, especially his insistence that communication remain open even during confrontation, has been met with impatience by the president's inner circle. They see dialogue as weakness, not strategy. Meanwhile, figures like Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev and Defense Minister Andrei Belousov have gained influence, shaping Russia's foreign posture with a more militarized tone. In such a climate, Lavrov's caution looks out of step. Still, those close to him defend his record. He's the last professional left in a system now run by ideologues, one former diplomat said. Indeed, Lavrov's mastery of global affairs and his institutional memory of crises, from Iraq and Syria to Crimea and Donbass, have no parallel in the Russian establishment. Losing him would deprive the Kremlin of both experience and continuity. But for Putin, who prizes loyalty above all else, even the perception of disagreement may be enough to end a two-decade partnership. Lavrov himself has avoided public confrontation. His last recorded remarks in Moscow were directed not at his critics, but at the state of global affairs. We are deeply outraged by the latest escalation in the Middle East following the airstrike on the Qatari capital of Doha, he said. We unequivocally condemn this Israeli action and emphasize that such actions against sovereign states are unacceptable under any pretext. It was classic Lavrov, formal, calculated and aligned with Moscow's anti-Western stance. But observers noticed what he didn't say: no reference to coordination with Putin, no mention of future policy, no signal of what comes next. Inside Russia, state television has offered no explanation for his absence. The Foreign Ministry's social media accounts continue to post routine updates, but none feature Lavrov himself. Even Maria Zakharova, his longtime spokeswoman, has limited her comments to general diplomatic statements. In political Moscow, silence speaks volumes, and this silence has become deafening. Internationally, Lavrov's disappearance has stirred curiosity. Western diplomats who once sparred with him described the change as extraordinary. One European ambassador called it the end of an era, noting that for all his bluster, Lavrov was the only Russian official who could still talk policy in detail. In Washington, some officials quietly admit they miss his predictability, a rare constant in an otherwise volatile Russia. If Lavrov's exit is indeed imminent, it marks more than a personnel change. It signals the consolidation of Putin's new order, one defined by control, secrecy, and the narrowing of dissent even within the ruling elite. Lavrov's diplomacy, rooted in negotiation, rhetoric, and the illusion of dialogue, no longer fits a system that thrives on confrontation and unpredictability. And yet, despite the rumors, there remains one lingering possibility: that Lavrov's silence is not punishment, but preparation. Some Kremlin watchers speculate that he may reappear soon, perhaps at a regional summit or in a televised address, to project continuity amid speculation. Such reappearances have happened before in Russian politics, where absence is often used as a tool to test loyalty or signal change. If that happens, Lavrov may yet reclaim his place, if only symbolically, as the veteran statesman of Putin's Russia. But until then, the question remains unanswered. Has Sergey Lavrov truly fallen out of favor with Vladimir Putin, or is this just another maneuver in the opaque choreography of Kremlin politics? In Moscow, even silence is political. And Lavrov's silence, after 20 years of being Russia's voice to the world, may be the loudest message of all.